For more than 2 millennia, the location of the tomb of Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, has been one of the ancient world's greatest mysteries, a fascination that has been fed by silence. History, written by her Roman victors, asserted that her end was tragic and that her remains, along with those of Mark Antony, were lost in the decay of the capital. Many archaeologists assumed that their mausoleums were submerged beneath the waves of the Mediterranean in the sunken city of Alexandria. But today the truth could lie much further west, in a little-known temple, Taposiris Magna. 48 kilometers from Alexandria, the Dominican archaeologist and lawyer Kathleen Martinez has built a case over more than a decade that could change history. Martinez, who considers Cleopatra her heroine, believes that the queen was deliberately buried in secret beneath this temple dedicated to the goddess Isis. Using ground-penetrating radar technology, her team has confirmed a find that could be the key: a subterranean cavity 9 meters long, perfectly carved beneath the temple entrance. This underground structure would have required a colossal effort, suitable only for someone of supreme importance. Is this the secret tomb of the queen that Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, wanted to erase from history? To understand why Cleopatra's end was erased and where she might have chosen her final refuge, we must set aside the myth of the seductress and reveal the formidable stateswoman who fought until her last breath for the survival of her kingdom. The Digital Historian presents Cleopatra. Cleopatra VII. Thea Philopator, born in the year 69 BC, was the last representative of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line of Macedonian rulers who took control of Egypt after the death of Alexander the Great. Although her heritage was Greek, after 3 centuries of lineage, her ethnic origin was likely already mixed. It is fundamental to understand that Cleopatra ascended to the throne of a government in full decline, strangled by the growing hegemony of Rome. The survival of the dynasty depended on flattery and bribery toward the Romans. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII Auletes, the flutist, was forced to seek the support of powerful men in Rome. This support was not cheap. Auletes bribed Pompey the Great and Julius Caesar with the astronomical figure of 6,000 talents, so that Rome would recognize him as a legitimate pharaoh, friend, and ally. The Ptolemaic family operated in an environment of intrigue and violence. Auletes himself, after being exiled and regaining the throne with Roman help in an army led by a young Mark Antony, did not hesitate to order the execution of his own eldest daughter, Berenice IV. This was Cleopatra's political school. She learned that familial piety was a luxury her crown could not afford. After her father's death, Cleopatra, aged 18, and her brother husband Ptolemy XIII, aged 10, became co-regents. Cleopatra, young but educated and intelligent, quickly established herself as the dominant ruler, making political decisions while studying in the great library of Alexandria. Her first great political act, which broke with the Greek isolation of her dynasty, was to learn the language of Egypt, Coptic, which was not her mother tongue. That was Koine Greek, spread along with Hellenism. This action was not a cultural whim, but a brilliant strategy for her legitimation. By not needing a translator, she earned the recognition of her Egyptian subjects, a crucial factor to secure a popular power base against court factions and the Roman threat. Furthermore, her effigy, and not that of her young brother, appeared on coins, a clear symbol of her supremacy. History, often influenced by Roman propaganda, insisted on portraying Cleopatra as an exotic seductress. However, historical sources and the coins minted by her tell a different story, very distinct from that of a femme fatale. The Greek historian Plutarch, despite criticizing her in his writings, had to acknowledge the truth of her appeal. This resided in her charisma, intellect, and the talent that this woman possessed for conversation. In fact, it is noted that the queen herself opted to display a resemblance to her father's image on coins to demonstrate her legitimate right to govern. Her power was not aesthetic, it was cerebral. This rapid projection of power earned her enemies. Only a year after ascending to the throne, Ptolemy XIII and his advisors conspired against her, managing to force her to abandon the throne and flee to Syria. But the queen refused to be displaced. She quickly formed an army and returned, facing her brother at Pelusium. This internal civil conflict was the perfect opening for Roman intervention. The Egyptian Civil War coincided with the climax of the Roman Republic's Second Civil War between Julius Caesar and Pompey the Great. After being defeated at Pharsalus, Pompey sought refuge in Egypt, hoping for help from Ptolemy XIII. The young pharaoh's faction committed a catastrophic political error. Fearing reprisals from Caesar, they ordered Pompey to be stabbed in cold blood just before he disembarked, and offered his head and the ring of his former ally to Caesar as a gift. This political immaturity deeply snubbed Caesar. Although they were rivals, Caesar was displeased by the murder of a Roman consul, regretting, according to some sources, having lost the opportunity to spare his life. Ptolemy XIII's gesture not only failed to ingratiate him with Caesar, but gave the Roman general the moral justification to intervene directly in Egyptian politics. Landing in Alexandria in 48 BC, Caesar installed himself in the palace to mediate the dispute, seeking peace to ensure that Egyptian grain continued to supply Rome. The brother, however, reinforced security to prevent Cleopatra's entry. Desperate, Cleopatra planned the most audacious public relations act of antiquity. Accompanied by a trusted man, she traveled in a boat and hid inside a large hemp sack, or according to other sources, a carpet. Her servant carried her to Caesar's chambers as if she were merchandise. This was not a romantic trick. It was a masterstroke of strategic capability and political courage. Caesar was captivated by the audacity of the woman who emerged from the carpet, a queen of great charisma and intellect. Cleopatra's diplomacy gave her the victory. Caesar mediated between the brothers, achieving a forced reconciliation, but the conflict escalated to the Battle of the Nile. In January of 47 BC, thanks to the arrival of Roman reinforcements, Caesar emerged victorious, and Ptolemy XIII died drowned, dragged to the bottom of the river by the weight of his golden armor. On March 27th, Cleopatra regained the throne. To maintain the Ptolemaic tradition of having a male on the throne, she married her remaining brother, Ptolemy XIV, 10 years her junior. In June, she gave birth to Ptolemy the 15th Philopator Caesar, known as Caesarion or Little Caesar. Although Julius Caesar was married in Rome and departed before the birth, he allowed the child to bear his name, a recognition that cemented Cleopatra's position. In this period, Cleopatra demonstrated her gifts as a ruler, reorganized the administration, and established a prosperous economy. After a drought, she demonstrated her concern for the people, prohibiting the sale of wheat abroad and selling part of her jewelry to give away grain, earning the respect of her subjects. She sought to restore the ancient glory of Egypt. In 46 BC, Cleopatra traveled to Rome, invited by Caesar, taking Caesarion and her entourage with her, as well as exotic gifts, such as a giraffe that left the Romans open-mouthed. They settled in a villa of Caesar's with spectacular views, where the dictator visited her often despite being married to Calpurnia. Cleopatra's presence in Rome was a public relations nightmare. The Roman people hated her viscerally. She was seen as a queen, rich, foreign, and intelligent woman whose power challenged the Roman patriarchal structure. They called her a serpent and branded her as immoral. The orator and philosopher Marcus Tullius Cicero came to describe her as a queen of harlots and witch. Roman indignation reached its peak when Caesar had a gold statue of Cleopatra erected in the temple of Venus Genetrix, an honor reserved for gods or renowned ancestors. The explanation for this stay was purely political. Cleopatra sought to secure her power and Caesarion's position as a potential successor to Caesar, since he had no other male children. The assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BC destabilized her position, forcing her to flee Rome. Back in Alexandria, the 25-year-old queen took decisive and cruel measures to prevent her brother husband Ptolemy XIV from allying with her sister Arsinoe IV, who was scheming from her exile in Ephesus. Cleopatra had him poisoned. Immediately afterward, she named Caesarion, aged 3, as co-regent and presented him to the people as a reincarnation of the Egyptian god, Horus, son of Isis. With chaos reigning in Rome and the rise of the Second Triumvirate, Octavian, Lepidus, and Mark Antony, Cleopatra needed a new protector. In 41 BC, Mark Antony, now governing the East, summoned her to Tarsus. Cleopatra, already a veteran diplomat, designed a spectacular staging for her arrival, understanding that Mark Antony, who identified with Dionysus, would respond to divine drama. She presented herself before him dressed as the goddess Isis, aboard a galley with a golden prow, purple sails scented with perfume, and oars tipped with silver. The use of Isis's costume was not an aesthetic detail. Archaeological evidence from Dendera confirms that Cleopatra wanted her subjects to see her as the incarnation of Isis, the goddess of healing and protection, thus guaranteeing unconditional support. Her meeting with Antony was a calculated mix of strategy and passion, securing in him a new protector and lover. Antony stayed to live in Alexandria that winter, sharing a taste for banquets and founding a drinking club. In this context of strategic excesses, Pliny the Elder recounted the famous anecdote of the pearl bet. Cleopatra bet Antony that she could spend 10 million sesterces, about 15 million euros in current value, on a single dinner. She removed one of her pearl earrings, dissolved it in vinegar, and drank the luxurious cocktail. Antony gave up before she dissolved the second pearl. Although the pearl would have needed days to dissolve, suggesting the anecdote has a high mythical component, this story served to cement her image of immense opulence and defiance, projecting a power that the new Roman ally needed. Although Antony was still married to Octavia, Octavian's sister, his bond with Cleopatra was formalized. They had twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene II, and a third child, Ptolemy Philadelphus. The relationship was based on a crucial political-economic alliance. In exchange for Cleopatra's financial and military support for his failed campaigns against Parthia, Antony ceded vast territories in the eastern Mediterranean to her, which gave Cleopatra control of a large part of the region at age 32. The turning point came in 34 BC. After his military failure, Antony returned to Alexandria and presided alongside Cleopatra, dressed as Isis and he as Dionysus, over the celebration of the donations of Alexandria. In an act of direct defiance to Rome, Antony granted lands in the east to his Egyptian children, and most importantly, recognized Caesarion as the heir of Julius Caesar. Such recognition delegitimized Octavian's position as the sole heir. This move was immediately exploited by Octavian to launch a massive propaganda war against Antony in Rome. Mark Antony was being accused of having become foreign, of being poisoned by the Egyptian queen, and what was most terrifying for the Senate, of intending to move the capital of the empire from Rome to Alexandria. This fear that Egypt would become the center of world power was the moral pretext Octavian needed. After Antony's divorce from Octavia, the war between Rome and Egypt was formalized. The decisive confrontation was the naval Battle of Actium in 31 BC. Despite having large forces, Antony and Cleopatra were defeated by Octavian's forces. The defeat was accelerated by the human factor. Quintus Dellius, a close friend of Antony, defected and handed over the battle plans to Octavian, claiming he feared being poisoned by Cleopatra. Seeing the battle lost, Cleopatra fled with her ships back to Alexandria, and Antony, leaving thousands of his men behind, followed her. This flight sealed the fate of the couple and of Egypt, with Octavian besieging Alexandria in 30 BC. The end was inevitable. Cleopatra tried to negotiate, asking Octavian to spare the lives of her children. In exchange, Octavian demanded a single price: assassinate Mark Antony. Antony, for his part, begged Octavian to spare Cleopatra's life. In exchange for his own suicide, Cleopatra, devastated by the siege and the ruin of her capital, took refuge in her mausoleum. From there, she had a false message sent to Mark Antony, informing him that she had committed suicide. Deceived, Antony stabbed himself with his sword, but failed in the attempt to pierce his heart. Dying, he was taken to the mausoleum and died in the arms of his queen, in an ending that emulated the Greek tragedies they knew so well. A few days later, on August 10th or 12th of 30 BC, Cleopatra took her own life at the age of 39. The method of her death has been historically debated. Some sources indicate that she ingested a poison of her own making, given her known inclination to investigate and test toxins on prisoners. Others, however, prefer the legend of the asp, a venomous Egyptian cobra. More recent studies suggest that a snake bite is unlikely, as it causes a long and painful death, which contrasts with Cassius Dio's report of a quiet and painless death. However, the legend of the asp was maintained for a weighty reason: political symbolism. The Egyptian cobra is the symbol of the goddess Wadjet, the protector of the pharaohs. By linking her death with the asp, real or fabricated, Cleopatra performed her last act of propaganda, ensuring she would be remembered not as the queen of harlots defeated by Rome, but as an Egyptian deity, Isis, returning to her world. Cleopatra had left a sealed letter to Octavian, asking to be buried with Mark Antony. The future emperor, although he complied with the funerary wish, took two crucial decisions to ensure the historical truth he wanted to impose. To consolidate his position as Julius Caesar's sole heir, Octavian ordered the execution of Caesarion upon his arrival in Alexandria. Octavian took charge of eliminating every vestige of the lover's glorious days. The mystery of the tomb is, therefore, a direct sequel to Octavian's propaganda campaign. The tomb was buried, but its location was actively suppressed from the Roman historical record to prevent it from becoming a place of pilgrimage and a symbol of defiance to the new imperial order. The remaining children of Antony and Cleopatra were sent to Rome and watched, but Octavian did not dare to murder them, thus ensuring he maintained control over the Ptolemaic line of succession. Cleopatra went from being a princess in decline to a formidable stateswoman who managed to get the two most powerful men in Rome to put their military power at the service of Egypt. She died at 39, maintaining her dignity and controlling the narrative of her own end. The only missing link in this epic biography is the final destiny of her remains. The search in Alexandria, the submerged capital, continues to be a hypothesis. However, the Taposiris Magna theory, driven by Kathleen Martinez, strengthens with every discovery. The tomb, if found here under the Temple of Isis, a ceremonial place far from the metropolis, would confirm Cleopatra's last strategy: to die and be buried not as a slave or a prisoner of Rome, but as a pharaoh, the incarnation of the goddess in the purest tradition of Egypt. The recent find of a submerged port near Taposiris Magna underscores the strategic and royal importance of the area, which consolidates the idea that this was a planned place of retreat. Now, archaeology competes against geology. The tunnels carved into the rock that could lead to the burial chamber are flooded. Martinez's team must drain the water to access the 9-meter cavity detected by the Georadar. This cavity is the great question mark that could rewrite the end of history. Do you believe that the silence imposed by Octavian Augustus will finally be broken by modern technology? Will Kathleen Martinez manage to drain the tunnels and confirm that this ceremonial hideout is the tomb of the last queen of Egypt? Leave your opinions in the comments. If you want to know more rigorous historical analyses and discover the secrets that the ancient world guarded jealously, subscribe to The Digital Historian.